Okay, Malik, you grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in the wake of the 1967 Civil Unrest. Can you paint a picture for listeners of what everyday life was like in your neighborhood during that time and how the events of the era shaped your sense of community and identity?
Sorry if I stated something vague when we was talking, but I grew up after the 67 Civil Unrest. And during that period of the 70s, it seemed the overall energy was about unifying and trying to stop the younger generation, which was my group, from falling into the trap of drugs, particularly the heroin epidemic. Along with this being from North, people isolated us from outside of the city as if, we was the plague or something. But what it did, it generated for my generation, a Newark style of expression, fashion, and word usage that became an exclusive Newark behavior, which later on people was gravitating to.
Okay. How do you see the mindset or outlook of your generation, those who came of age after the 60s, differing from the generations that followed, especially in the terms of hope, resilience, or challenges faced?
You got some heavy questions. The impression which I received from the generation after the 1980s is that people took ways and methods for granted and not understanding the reasons of the ways and the methods. As I became a young adult, I realized people I grew up with all strive to do better, knowing that there exist hindrances and prejudices, but the experience of growing up in the projects and planning in those, most of us, the mentality that if we made it out of the projects, then other obstacles can be dealt with. But I'm convinced it is the ignorance, and I'm not saying this in a negative manner, but it is the act of not knowing history which places us in a panic. If we understand the past, then we can see the patterns repeating only because we have the knowledge of the past. So, that's the best way I can answer that joint with dealing with facing challenges.
Okay. You've mentioned that growing up in the Nation of Islam gave you a unique perspective on struggle and respect. How did those teachings influence your worldview and your approach to adversity?
All right. The main thing I personally received from growing up in the Nation of Islam is the belief in Allah. And knowing the opening prayer, which is known as Fatiha, and memorizing that and planting that in my heart with sincerity, that's what truly helped me to see a different outlook, because I didn't want to get trapped into how can I put it, like what everybody an indoctrination of everybody seeing it one view. So by having that influence and growing up in the nation, it gave me the mindset to see another view, not just what we, was promoted in the news or in the media, but see it from another aspect. And that's really what kept me personally balanced.
Okay. Excuse me. You've spoken about the role of older men in guiding youth during your upbringing. How has the disappearance of that kind of mentorship affected today's young people, in your view?
What I have noticed is that the youth began following musicians and characters in movies and convincing that these personalities are sincerely identifying with their current experience, that the intention what they focus towards is just marketing. And because there's not anyone sincerely having conversations with the youth, to me this is a design. If we look at the school system, amongst the ideas placed upon the children is the school is a safe zone. And then within this concept of a safe zone, You can talk to us about your secrets that your parents will not understand. In the fact that schools' objectives are supposed to be about educating the children towards the goals and objectives of a society, not convincing the children the school staff can provide and nurture your well-being and not your parents.
Yeah. After serving as a corrections officer for 12 years, what are the biggest misconceptions you think the public has about the justice system, and what truths do you wish more people understood?
In my view, the biggest misconceptions are portrayed in the shows like Law and Order, but, that's my view, like all these crime shows and all that. One of the truths is why are there no opportunities which are being substituted with crime? Example, what has encouraged young teenagers, like you heard, and I don't know if you heard, but like in Jersey a couple of months ago, to travel 25 miles outside their neighborhood to steal cars, to have the confidence to break into that house to obtain the car keys. This may not be so much of a criminal mind, but one who has been trained with the indoctrination, no harm will come to them. And if we notice that, even like I remember growing up, like in the 70s, I had put it in a book, that once the factories and businesses, the manufacturing left the inner cities, poverty rose up, and inner cities couldn't really maintain their infrastructure. But instead of dealing with, okay, what is the economic issues, they tried to blame it on people of wanting to be on welfare and being lazy. So these misconceptions is okay, if it's crime, why is there crime? It's not crime because people want to just be criminals and negative. It's something that's causing that to happen.
What inspired you to begin researching your family's roots, and what were some of the most surprising or emotional moments you encountered as you traced your lineage back to 1642 in Southampton, Virginia?
My motivation was to preserve some of the former history for my, next generation of my family, which for me came very fast, like far as just the research. It was just like mind-boggling, because I never thought I would reveal the past in the manner like it appeared once I started putting the names. And in this, I'm talking about genealogy. I ain't talking about DNA. And particularly to explain for me the clear methods which occurred and effects upon our minds and perspective. Because what I did after I saw this information, I just start comparing, the history of time frames, trying to get a different perspective. Because one of the things that was like mind-boggling, well, not mind-boggling, but I say like really surprising, is that I wasn't finding anyone as slaves. Everyone was on the records as free people of color, farmers, and it was just like hold up, this is not like what we've been taught, so that's it just changed everything. It just changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of stuff that my grandmother had said to me, I said, yo, man, she was right. Because it's different. Is when we in history, when we're in school, we taught one thing. And I have found that there's a lot. I'm not the only one, but there's a lot of people. When you speak to your elders, I don't know about now, but back then when I was speaking to like my grandmother, and I was fortunate enough to speak to my great grandmother, when I was like a teenager. So the stories they were saying, it conflict with what you was reading and learning about. but yet you didn't know how to get the evidence, to confirm their stories compared to what we are told. So to find all this and to just go back and then go with history and relook at history again based upon, the ancestors I found at certain dates, it just changed everything. It just changed everything.
Yeah, we're actually tracing our roots and stuff, my brother and myself. So we've found out a lot, and we've met a lot of new people in our family and stuff too. So I feel like everybody should do that.
Yeah.
Everybody should do that.
No, because it would change really if people was to do this, right? This would change the whole history of what we was taught, number one. And it would change the whole, all this tension, a lot of this tension, it'll change, it'll spin that joint around. And we will come to understand, when we talk about, like, say, rights or whatever, it'll be a deeper understanding of, okay, what's your rights? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you really look into your family history.
Yeah.
And compare it with history. The family history compared with history.
Yep. Mhm. Okay. Your book explores overlooked events like the War of 1812 and their impact on American Indian communities. Why do you think these stories are missing from mainstream history? And what should listeners know about this period?
If people was to understand that time frame during that period, the entire slave story would change. The entire portrayal of the history of the establishment of the southern states and the tension between the people would develop an entirely different story. These points, I encourage the people to purchase the book, to read for themselves. Then let's have a discussion, because just think, we know about American, like most of the people, I think, if somebody was to say, okay, tell me about Revolutionary War, we could break that joint down. Talk about the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam. I think people could break that down. But when we talk about that World War 1812, there's a lot of stuff that happened. And it's more to it than just them coming in and burning down D.C. And, that I say I encourage people to get the book and read that aspect, because that's going to be mind-blowing. Even if we look at the whole thing of Nat Turner, it'll be mind-blowing.
Nat Turner is one of my favorite people from history, him and Harriet Tubman. I have a Black History Encyclopedia, and it gives you the stories of all of the Black people in history, because I raised my daughter to learn about Black history and stuff like that, because, like you said, they don't teach us that stuff in school. So I have all those things, and I'm definitely going to try to purchase your book, because I know nothing about the War of 1812. Nothing at all. And
me either. And what happened, I didn't know anything until, like I said, I started just to dig deeper into my family history. I just, like I said, because at certain points, you know how, like, you look up history. I'll give you an example. You look up history, and your family history, and you get a stump, right? Get that name, it's a time, and you can't find nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to break it down real quick. I'm going to give you an example. I have an ancestor, the last name Rains, from North Carolina, and according to the records, he was born in Wake County, or Wake Forest, right? Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't find nothing, right? I got his name, I got his year. So I said, why I can't? What's going on? What is it that I'm not seeing? Because I was, like I said, I try to look at things as a different view, as opposed to all they blocked and stuff and this and that and that. So when I really focused on his year that he was born, Wake County didn't exist, and Wake Forest didn't exist. So that was another mind blowing, and that's most of the stuff that happened when we can't find nothing. You get that ancestor that you found and nothing else. because you got to look at that time frame, you got to look at that region, and then you come to find out most likely that place that now exists where they are didn't exist during that time yet.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And
Okay.
that's, to me, that's part of keeping us to the that indoctrination about the slaves.
Yes. Yeah. You raise provocative questions about the differences between Native American and American Indian, and even the African American experience. How do you hope your research and writing will encourage others to question or re-examine accepted narratives about American history?
All right. Now, I know some people that might see this as touchy-feely, but I'm going to try to be as much gentle as I can. When it comes to American Indian and the Native Americans, when I start looking into the old books, like say anything before 1812, 1800s, they wasn't saying Native Americans. They were saying American Indians. So at first I wasn't really paying it no mind. But then I started, when you get into that 1812 period, that's when you see the switch took place from American Indians to Native Americans. And even the complexion, the features, everything changed. And this is where the race ideology was really established in North America. We say wilderness North America, or the infancy of the United States, because that 1800 period is right after the Revolutionary War. And this is where you find who is determined amongst the white race, who is determined amongst the red race, and who is determined from the black race. And even when you deal with the Indian rolls, I mean, that's a big question, because if you look at the year of the Indian rolls, all right, if you got ancestors going back before the Indian rolls, the census rolls, and ancestors, you can find ancestors back to before 1812, in the 1700s, or even, before the American Revolutionary War. And they on the rolls as Negro, free people of color. And then when you start to look up that's another word for American Indians. So now you question, okay, what's the, who are really we say indigenous, or who are the Indians? Because even today, if you look at videos and stuff and people, and you ask, okay, you like to be referred as Native American Indians, they don't like to get into it. They just say, any term matters, but it does matter, because the Indian, the concept of, is a reason why it's American Indian. That Indian means something else. That Indian is a different complexion. Like when we grew up, people say, yo, such and such, Veronica from Runaway, the red bone one, not the other one, the red bone one. What do that mean when they call people red bones? That means something totally different. And that go back to what the description is of who they said was the people they encountered in first contact, whether it was North America, Puerto Rico, Cuba, South America. All these people had a particular feature and complexion. And then when we look at all this, because the incident, if we say American, the Afro-Americans, right? If we say Afro-Americans, and we understand that, okay, African-American, Afro-American, that signifies people that were, their ancestors was enslaved. But what happens when you go back and you find that your ancestors was enslaved? Or what happens when you find out that your ancestors was enslaved, but the time frame that they was enslaved predates the history of when they said the Africans came here? So now, who are you?
Yeah. Okay. For listeners who want to explore their own family histories, especially those from communities whose stories are often erased or overlooked? What practical advice or encouragement would you offer? And what legacy do you hope your work leaves for future generations?
I say, I wish that everybody would actually explore their family history, number one. And look at the time frames. Like I said before earlier, like anytime you get a stump, look at the time frames. Look and see what's going on. Look at the area. Were these towns that we take for granted, was they actually existing? And it's a must to just look at the family history and don't go with that DNA. Look at your genealogy, because us knowing our history, in this sense of history, I think it'll change everything. Everything that we're experiencing, it'll give a whole new, it'll open people up, and it will break down, to me, a lot of barriers, a lot of things that's going on, if we just look at our history and see exactly, okay, who we are.
Yeah, I think that'll be good too. I'm definitely gonna look more into it. Tell everyone how they can find you on social media, and I do believe you have a podcast, correct?
Yeah, I got a podcast on YouTube called Roc the Mike by Malik H. Majeed. Where in the podcast, and this came about from writing a book, I explore, we'll just say, the conflicts in the English with the English language, when just dealing with Islam, and how these conflicts of the English language, when trying to understand Islam and the Muslims, and how it relates to the ancestries of us who actually can trace back to be American Indians, and everything that happened with the colonizing of North America. That's how I explore the podcast. And then for the purchase of the book, if you want a hard copy, you just go to DorranceBookstore.com, and you can see my listing for Roc the Mike under history. Or if you just want an electronic book, the ebook, you can purchase from Amazon or the Barnes & Noble website.
Okay, that's wonderful. It has been great interviewing you today. I have learned a lot, and I look forward to working with you further.
Yeah, me too, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak to your followers and listeners, and hope this will be beneficial to them.